So you should be getting that now. Yep, you should be hearing that now. Yeah? Yep. Sound check, sound check. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So you think you're going to the north? Yeah? Okay, great.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. The weekend just passed marked a quarter of a century since the opening of the Scottish Parliament. And of course, after 25 years, the Scottish Parliament is very much at the heart of Scottish society. But the fact is that it is still a young institution, and its best days lie ahead of it. The Scottish Parliament was created to deliver the change that modern Scotland needs. Inscribed on the ceremonial mace were Donald Dewar's guiding principles for his new Parliament: wisdom, justice, compassion and integrity. And it was those guiding principles that led the Scottish Labour governments at Holyrood to deliver fundamental change in Scottish society. Under Scottish Labour, the Scottish Parliament delivered free bus travel for the over 60s and disabled people. We introduced free nursing and personal care for the elderly. We supported the next generation by delivering free nursery hours, record investment in schools, and scrapped upfront tuition fees. And we tackled the scourge of homelessness and battled poverty head-on, lifting over 240,000 Scots out of poverty. We banned smoking in public places, we designated Loch Lomond and the Trossachs and the Cairngorms as national parks, and we introduced Scotland's first climate change targets. And we grew our economy so that every Scot could have the first-class public services that they deserve. This was the change that Scottish Labour made, and I was proud to serve in that first Scottish Labour government led by Donald Dewar. But now the need for change could not be clearer. 17 years of SNP failure have led to collapsing public services, slow economic growth, and sleaze and scandal seeping into Holyrood. That's why Scottish Labour is committed to resetting devolution so that it works for everyone, tackling sleaze and increasing transparency so Scots can hold their MSPs to account. And we need new faces and fresh ideas at the top. Politicians who will put country before party and serve the people. In Anas Sarwar, I'm proud to say Scottish Labour has a leader with the drive to renew devolution in Scotland and the vision for a fairer, happier and more prosperous Scotland that we need. 25 years ago, Scottish Labour changed Scotland for the better. We are ready to do so again, and Scottish Labour is the change that Scotland needs. So please join me in welcoming Anas Sarwar.
I was clapping eventually. Thank you, friends. Thank you. New councillor. Thank you. Friends, thank you. Thank you. Friends, 25 years ago, Winnie Ewing opened the first session of our new Parliament with the words, "The Scottish Parliament, which adjourned on 25th March 1707, is hereby reconvened." That historic moment marked the end of a long and hard-fought journey to achieve Scottish devolution, championed and delivered by a Labour government. And when you look through the official report for that day in 1999, there are many familiar names who took the oath as they became the very first members of our new Parliament. Among them is one Jackie Baillie, Dumbarton Scottish Labour, still a young candidate, and a seat that has remained in Labour hands at every election since. So thanks to the people of Dumbarton who continue to put their trust in Jackie. They couldn't ask for a better local representative, and I couldn't ask for a better deputy. So thank you, Jackie. And the list of people present at that historic opening also includes the names of some who are no longer with us, who we remember today. Including, of course, the man whose statue is outside this building, our nation's First Minister, the father of devolution, Donald Dewar. And there were many who were part of that journey to devolution who sadly did not get to see the day our party's promise became a reality. And today we particularly remember John Smith. John died 30 years ago yesterday, and our thoughts are with Elizabeth, Jane, Sarah, Catherine, and all the Smith family as we remember a hero of our Labour movement. Under his leadership, John committed a future Labour government to establishing a Scottish Parliament. It was, as he rightly observed, the will of the Scottish people. And it was 5 years after his death that John's unfinished business was completed, led by his friend Donald and all those in our party who were so determined to deliver on our promise. And today, a quarter of a century on, we also remember those famous words from John, who said, "The opportunity to serve, that is all we ask." John's moral compass, his commitment to public service, his determination to build trust in politics, his internationalism, and his belief in devolution continues to guide me and everyone in our party today. And in this general election year, we are once again asking the people of this country for the opportunity to serve, because there is no greater honour. And it's an honour that our newest councillor, Mary Hume, now enjoys after she was elected last Friday in the Kilwinning by-election with a 10% swing from the SNP to Labour. So congratulations, Mary. You'll be an outstanding local champion for your community. People in Kilwinning and across the country are sick and tired of the division and decline of SNP and Tory governments. They are desperate for change, and we are ready to serve. In every contest, Labour Party candidates continue to draw strength from John Smith's legacy, and every Labour councillor, every Labour MSP, and every Labour MP elected here in Scotland and across the UK will be committed to serving their community, working together to deliver the change our country needs. And friends, I wonder what John would have thought of the first 25 years of devolution. This anniversary is an opportunity to look back at what Labour achieved in those early years of our Parliament. We banned smoking in pubs and restaurants, making Scotland healthier. We provided free bus travel for the over 60s and disabled people, making Scotland more accessible. We introduced free nursery places, making Scotland an even better place to bring up a family. We grew our economy, creating more than 250,000 new jobs, making Scotland a place where long-term youth unemployment was a thing of the past. We invested in education and learning, making Scotland's schools amongst the best in the world for numeracy and literacy. We introduced free personal care and free nursing, making Scotland a place where people always have dignity in their old age. We made eye checkups free for everyone, introduced free central heating for older people, recruited 1,500 police officers and cut crime, delivered land reform, helped people on low incomes own their own homes, introduced climate change targets and didn't water them down, attracted skilled workers through the Fresh Talent Scheme, reduced the business rates burden, made Scotland more transparent through the Freedom of Information Act, allowed people to get married where they wanted to, made school meals healthy, reduced inequalities with child poverty falling faster in Scotland than anywhere else in the UK, and massively increased spending on our NHS with nearly 700 extra doctors and more than 5,000 extra nurses. Friends, when we have the opportunity to serve, that is the change a Labour government can deliver. Now, it would be remiss of me not to recognise the important social policies delivered by the Scottish Parliament in the years since Labour was in power. Equal marriage, the Scottish child payment, and a renationalised ScotRail, which Labour campaigned so hard for. But there's no escaping the fact that the opportunities of devolution have been squandered by the SNP. Too often, this government is distracted by its narrow obsessions and internal divisions. Meaning today, there are more than 820,000 Scots stuck on an NHS waiting list. Almost 10,000 children living in temporary accommodation with no home to call their own. And our once great education system has plummeted down the international league tables. So we need change to bring NHS waiting lists down, to tackle the record levels of homelessness, and to close the attainment gap in our education system. And we need a government that rises to today's challenges, which are the biggest since the dawn of devolution. Now, I don't know if you watched First Minister's questions last week, but John Swinney claimed that fresh leadership had arrived. Now, I'm not sure that I've ever heard the chamber erupt in laughter the way that it did last Thursday, including the SNP MSPs, by the way. But you could tell from John's face that not even he believed his own spin. Perhaps that's because he's been around politics for so long. He was, of course, there the day that Parliament opened a quarter of a century ago, and I do recognise his long career of public service. But after so many years of SNP mismanagement, we can't just have more of the same. Continuity will not cut it. Chaos and incompetence cannot be as good as it gets, because you can't unite our country by trying to divide it. Our country needs change. We need credible, fresh and effective leadership. And Labour is the only party trying to pull Scotland together. And that is why we are ready for the next election, so that we can ask the people of Scotland for the opportunity to change our country for the better. But friends, it's clear that the SNP are scared of the verdict of the people. And the Tories too are terrified, but they don't have a choice. Rishi Sunak must call a general election by the end of this year. There is something fundamental happening in this country now. People who for years have been Conservatives have lost the faith, and many people who sat on the edge of British politics have realised there is only one way forward for this country. A government with purpose, pragmatism and economic determination, and for social justice. The words of John Smith, as relevant today as they were then. And today it's the Labour Party under Keir Starmer's leadership that has that purpose, pragmatism, economic determination and drive for social justice. And at the general election, we will ask the British people to vote for change so that we can deliver those values in government. So no SNP or Tory seat is now safe. Labour will be fighting to win in every part of Scotland. And as I have said before, I don't care how people voted in the last election, or indeed the one before that. And I don't care how they voted in the referendums. If you agree that our country needs change, then vote for it, so that we can once again have a government focused on creating jobs and lowering bills. A government focused on building new homes and ending the housing emergency, raising education standards and delivering the economic growth our country so desperately needs. Because in the Labour Party, we recognise that we can only deliver the social justice we want if we are determined to grow our economy. Across the UK, businesses are suffering because of Tory chaos. And here in Scotland, businesses are suffering because of SNP incompetence. So it falls once again to the Labour Party to fix our economy and create jobs. John Smith's withering put-down of his Tory opponent as a devalued Prime Minister of a devalued government can also now be said of Rishi Sunak. Sunak and the conveyor belt of failed Tory chancellors have ruined our economy and choked off opportunity for working families. But this general election is an opportunity to fix our economy by bringing back fiscal credibility, creating good jobs, including 50,000 clean power jobs right here in Scotland through GB Energy, and enshrining workers' rights through Angela Rayner's New Deal for working people. And over the past quarter of a century, it is Labour chancellors who have delivered long-term plans for growth. Gordon Brown and our dear friend Alistair Darling, who we think of and miss greatly today. And that work continues if the people of this country elect a Labour government with Rachel Reeves as Britain's first woman Chancellor ever. Friends, if Labour persuades the people to put their trust in us, we can not only deliver the change our country needs, but we can start the journey to make devolution work for the people of Scotland once again. Because an entire generation of Scots has been brought up to believe that our two governments are constantly at loggerheads with each other. That this is somehow just the way that things are. Well, that's not how devolution is meant to work. So we will go back to the vision that John Smith, Donald Dewar and others in our Labour movement had for cooperation between our governments, making devolution fit for the future. We will repair relationships between the Scottish and UK governments by engaging constructively and cooperatively despite our political difference. That is what the people of Scotland demand and deserve. And we will demonstrate to the public how much more we could do with Labour in government, both in Westminster and the Scottish Parliament. Because on this anniversary, we must recognise that many young Scots can't remember what Scottish Labour delivered in power in Holyrood. So if you're graduating from university or college this summer, you don't know anything other than SNP government. And you've known nothing other than incompetent government in both Edinburgh and London. And young people have been let down by those in power so much. So they ask us, how can we trust you to deliver if we give you the opportunity? Well, the answer is this. Because we delivered on our promise to create a Scottish Parliament, we made devolution work in those early years, and we will make devolution work again. We will get on with the job of fixing the mess of the past 17 years and deliver for you and the people of Scotland just as we did before. We will not seek to undermine devolution like the Tories, nor will we seek to end devolution like the SNP, because we are the party of devolution. Decisions made in Scotland by the people of Scotland. Scottish solutions to Scottish problems. Our Scottish Parliament, a voice to shape Scotland, a voice for the future, as Donald Dewar famously said. And with Labour, the day of fighting old battles will be over, and we will make Holyrood the voice for the future once again. It was our Labour Party that delivered the words inscribed on the ceremonial mace, as Jackie referenced. There shall be a Scottish Parliament. It was a hope, then a belief, then a promise, then a reality. But there are other words on that mace too. Wisdom, compassion, justice, and integrity. And I make my own pledge today that Scottish Labour will bring back those founding values of devolution so they are once again at the heart of our democracy as we enter the next 25 years of our nation's story. Wisdom. Now, I don't pretend to have all the answers for the challenges facing our country. And frankly, any politician that says they do is not telling you the truth. But I do believe in the wisdom of all the Scottish people. Our nation is brimming with talent, which is why I've spent so much time over the last 3 years meeting with businesses, workers, families, charities, trade unions, and community groups. I listen to their ideas for the future. I've heard their anger with the status quo, and I've seen their hope for change. So if you run a business and you have ideas on how to grow an economy, I'm listening. And if you work for a charity and you have ideas on how to deliver better social justice, I'm listening. And we are now formally kicking off our manifesto process for 2026 with elections for our Scottish Policy Forum taking place over the summer. And those elected will have a chance to help shape our future offer to the people of Scotland. Because when our Parliament first opened, Donald Dewar and the Scottish Labour Party recognised that we needed the collective wisdom of the Scottish people to build the better future we aspire to. That remains true today. Now, the SNP is only prepared to listen to half the country. I pledge, I promise, to listen to everyone in our nation. I believe in the collective wisdom of all our Scottish people, and I know our collective talents will shape the future of Scotland. Compassion and justice. The last Labour government lifted 2 million children and pensioners out of poverty across the UK. Work that was started by John Smith with his Pathways Out of Poverty. And we can do it again. Labour will make work pay by creating more better paid jobs, driving down household bills, combating food poverty, and reaching our child poverty targets. We will fundamentally reform universal credit so that it provides a proper safety net for those who need it, with compassion at its heart. But tackling poverty isn't just about protecting the welfare state built by Labour. It's also about giving people a path out of poverty. And the route out of poverty isn't just welfare payments. It's education, skills and work. So I'll take no lectures from John Swinney, who claims eradicating child poverty is his mission. This is the man who, as Education Secretary, downgraded the results of working class kids during the pandemic. So no lectures from John. He should get on with using the powers he has in our Scottish Parliament. Instead, Labour is the party of work. Our New Deal for working people will strengthen workers' rights and tackle the scourge of in-work poverty by banning exploitative zero-hour contracts, ending fire and rehire, and delivering wages that people can actually live on. And we will incentivise people into work and ensure that employability support is integrated across Scotland and the UK. We will improve opportunities in the classroom so that we close the attainment gap, build more affordable homes to end the housing emergency, and equip our young people with the skills they need for the jobs of the future. Now, the SNP has failed to make progress to address these fundamental challenges because it has failed to deliver economic growth. Because only by growing our economy can we deliver the social justice that we are so passionate about. And whilst our public services are in crisis following years of Tory and SNP mismanagement, it is our NHS which needs a Labour government the most. Our proudest achievement as a party, established on the principles of social justice and something we have nurtured through the decades. I'm thinking of those famous words. If the Labour Party did nothing else in all its history to have founded the National Health Service and lifted the care and worry from our people, and founded a health service which was only to do with human need and not to do with money and access, or to do with privilege or anything else, they would know that the Labour Party had achieved a great virtue. But now we have to come back and restore it once again. The words, again, of John Smith. And once again, it is today's Labour Party which must restore our NHS. So we deliver a true NHS recovery plan that gets the NHS fit for the next 25 years. We want to transform our NHS into a modern service that is based in communities, values its staff, and focuses on promoting health as well as treating illness. And Labour will deliver funding for 160,000 more appointments each year to tackle the waiting list backlog, provide a mental health worker in every GP surgery, and harness technology and innovation so patients can be diagnosed and treated faster. That is the change our NHS needs, but it's only possible with a Labour government in Westminster delivering the policies that generate the revenue to invest in public services, and a Scottish Labour government in Holyrood that prioritises the recovery of our devolved NHS. A renewed and repaired NHS that puts patients and staff first. A health service that our party invented, a health service that our party will always protect, and a health service built on the values of compassion and social justice for all our people. And finally, integrity. Integrity. A value sadly lacking in both the Tory and SNP governments. From Boris Johnson's lockdown parties to Nicola Sturgeon and John Swinney's systematic deletion of evidence for the COVID inquiry, we have two administrations with no integrity that undermines trust in our politics. Now, trust was a byword for John Smith's brand of politics. He said our people need better protection against the kind of arrogance of power that puts vested interest before the national interest and ideology before need. He could have been talking about Rishi Sunak's Tories today or John Swinney's SNP of today. Arrogant, drunk on power, putting their own narrow interests ahead of the national interest. That is why we need democratic and social renewal across our nations and regions. So on this 25th anniversary of devolution, we need to strengthen our democracy. Labour has done it before, and we will do it again. We will prioritise cooperation over conflict and ensure that Scotland is at the heart of government in Westminster, with Scottish MPs sitting around the Cabinet table. We will clean up the Scottish Parliament, with MSPs granted the same privileges and protections as MPs and stronger powers for the Parliament to hold ministers to account. That includes the election of committee conveners, the right to recall MSPs, a ban on second jobs, and stronger FY laws to ensure greater transparency and to rebuild trust in politics. And we will push power out of Holyrood and into the regions of Scotland. John Smith spoke of the persistent and relentless undermining of local government, which has gone on for more than a decade. Well, under the SNP, we've had nearly 2 decades of local government being undermined. And isn't it deeply ironic that on this 25th anniversary of devolution, which was meant to be all about moving power closer to people, that we have a First Minister who, when he was Finance Secretary, sucked power up to Holyrood and decimated local government and decimated local services. The SNP is not a party of devolution. It wants to hoard power in Edinburgh. But Labour believes in the integrity of devolution. So we will empower communities with a new fair funding model for local councils and a Local Democracy Act to create regional mayors and greater cooperation across our regions, democratic renewal within Scotland and integrity in our Parliament. That's the change Scotland needs. So friends, as we reflect on the past quarter of a century and our party's role in delivering devolution, we stand at a key moment in our nation's history. There is a choice ahead of us. More of the same under the SNP and the Tories, or change with the Scottish Labour Party. And we ourselves have changed as a party. In John Smith's first speech as leader, he recognised the party of change must be ready to change itself, to be the best and most effective vehicle for realising our values. In each age and every generation, as we advance and grow, as we attempt to achieve more and always to reach higher, it has been the Labour Party that has led the quest for progress. Those words ring true today. And today, that quest falls on us, to this generation, so we can deliver the change which brings back the values of wisdom, justice, compassion, and integrity to our politics. Change which builds on the work of those in our Labour movement who came before us. Change which focuses on the issues that matter most to you today, ending the cost of living crisis, tackling child poverty, delivering a jobs-first green transition, and fixing our NHS. And change which delivers the better future for Scotland. I firmly believe that can be the future ahead of us. But we have to go out there, build trust, gain support, and win that future together. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to take some media questions. Andrew, BBC.
Good morning. Thank you. Now, Labour designed the Scottish Parliament to be a parliament of minorities. Is it now time to look to the future and perhaps work constructively with the SNP? And just secondly, John Swinney is at Ardussie Airport today. They've received £100 million from the National Investment Bank. Is he now getting his priorities right on the Scottish economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. The first thing I'd say is that there is something galling about a political party and a First Minister that was the architect of divisive politics, who made it an art form to shout down and clamp down opposition and to attack publicly and privately opposition political parties, to now pretend he is the great unifier of our nation. The reality is John Swinney has been at the heart of every SNP failure for the last 17 years. He's been at the heart of the SNP political leadership for the last 40 years. So he's right, we need a new kind of politics. He's right, we need constructive politics. He's right, we need to have a parliament of minorities that respects across the chamber. But the harsh reality is, it can't come from him. He's had his chance, he's had his opportunity, and after 17 years, Scotland has paid the price. So we need fresh leadership, we need new ideas, we need change, and that can only come with the Scottish Labour government in 2026. On the growth question, look, again, if you look at our economy, we're lagging behind other parts of the UK. A good comparison, actually, for us is if you look at what's happening in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester has fewer powers and fewer economic levers than we have in Scotland, but it is using the levers, the limited levers it has, to outstrip almost every other part of the country in terms of inward investment and growth. Just imagine we had a government here in Scotland that was willing to use the levers, for example, around our skills system, around our rate system, around our tax system, around decluttering the economic landscape. Imagine what more we could do if I had a coordinated plan to grow Scotland's economy and a central strategic plan to deliver economic growth, and then use the fruits of that economic growth to deliver for every part of our nation. Instead, what we have is government by press release and government by announcement. A bit of money put here for a nice photo op and a press release, a bit of money put here with no coherent strategy. That is fundamentally going to change. We will put an economic directorate at the heart of the office of First Minister. We will have an overarching economic growth plan that covers every part of government, and we will make sure that economic growth becomes our #1 priority, and then using the fruits of that economic growth to reform our public services, in particular our NHS, and then using the fruits of that growth to bring down the tax burden on working people right across Scotland. And again, that change only comes if people vote for it, and I'm desperate for those elections, as you can tell from my comments in the last few weeks and today. Is there someone from STV as well? I see Alison at the back. Great, no problem. Alison's going to nab me later. That sounds ominous. Anyone from print that wants to kick off? On you go. Well, the first thing to say is that, look, I actually think about the UK Conservative Party and use that as a reflection. People said Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak will follow. He's more competent than Liz Truss, so therefore that must be dangerous for the Labour Party. In actual fact, it hasn't transpired that way. He might sound more competent, he may be more competent, but what people have already made their minds up. They think it's a chaotic and dysfunctional UK Tory government, and they can see he is just a veneer that covers a divided and chaotic and dysfunctional political party underneath. I think that veneer is now John Swinney with the SNP. He might want to pretend he gives a more stable approach in terms of the language he uses, the way he carries himself, but underneath that, there is still that chaotic, divided, dysfunctional SNP. He still has the baggage of 17 years of failure, and I think the more the Scottish people look at his record and what that has meant for them in practice, and now when they look at his delivery directly as First Minister, they will see this is just a more of the same cabinet. It is a continuity cabinet. In actual fact, the only thing that's changed is that Kate Forbes has been brought in. Every single other cabinet member has kept their same job, and the very same people that failed our public services are now expecting us to believe them that they're now the ones that are going to fix it. So I don't buy the argument, and I look forward, both in the general election and in the next Scottish Parliament election, to take on John Swinney, to take on the SNP, and to win the argument, and to rebuild trust with the Scottish people, and to win those elections. On the Scottish Greens comments about Kate Forbes, I think undoubtedly there is a language shift and perhaps a positioning shift from the SNP that has shifted it more to the right than what was there previously. Look, I've got lots of criticisms of Nicola Sturgeon, I have lots of criticisms of her record, but no one can argue that she was a social policy-led First Minister. I don't think we're going to get that with this current leadership, and neither do I think they have the credible economic plan that's going to give us the growth that we need to deliver. And so there's undoubtedly been a shift. I think the question, though, that should be asked is to the SNP, because the SNP can't pretend to be all things to all people anymore. It's done it for a very, very long time, but I think they're now being found out. And I want to know where that progressive majority that apparently exists and the SNP now views its current policy position. So people should be asking, is this SNP new leadership, do they still support workers paying higher taxes than the other parts of the UK? Do they still support increasing taxes on nurses but lowering taxes on the oil and gas giants making record profits? Do they still support taking money away from local government and decimating local services? Because I've heard a lot about the personality changes. I've heard nothing about what they're actually going to do to fix our NHS. I've heard nothing about what they're going to do to fix broken local government. I've heard nothing about what they're going to do to fix our education system. I've heard nothing meaningful about how they're going to work with businesses to grow our economy. It's all about managing the political party, nothing to do with running the country. We, the Labour Party, are now putting country first, changing our party so we can change our country. On you go.
Thanks, Anas. Can I get your thoughts on the conversion therapy ban? You have the Greens saying that they won't support it if it's not watertight, but John Swinney this morning saying he's going to reflect on some of the concerns raised by some of the campaign groups and by Dr. Hilary Cass. Where are Labour on this? Are you minded? Would you support the government here? And secondly, can I ask, are you having any conversations with any Tory MSPs about possible defections? Would you accept any Tory MSP into the group?
Well, I can clamp down the second part of the question. There are no discussions with Tory MSPs, although I can imagine a lot of Tory MSPs will view this current Conservative Party as being completely alien to the Ruth Davidson Scottish Conservatives that was in place a while ago. So if any of them are thinking of jumping ship, they should come out and just say, first of all, that the dysfunctional Tory government should go and people should vote Labour across the country. I think that would be the starting point. On the important question you asked about conversion therapy, obviously that has been a manifesto commitment of ours. It continues to be something that we are committed to. But I think there are lessons that have to be learned. And one of the things I would challenge the SNP leadership on is they can no longer take the goodwill of the public and the goodwill of the Parliament and then turn that into incompetent delivery of policy which actually undermines the cause of progressive values and undermines the cause of social justice. So we will look at any piece of legislation that comes before the Parliament. We will scrutinise it based on its merits, but we need confidence that what the government actually promises in the Parliament is actually then what is implemented and delivered for people across the country. Because what happens when it doesn't happen? Let's take two examples, the GRR bill and the hate crime bill. On the GRR bill, since its passing, the trans community feel no more protected and women feel no more reassured. And on the hate crime bill, because of the chaotic implementation of the hate crime bill, you actually have police saying they're now not able to investigate crimes in a way that they should have been able to, and you have, I think, a disconnect where you have to try and challenge prejudice and hate. And I've always viewed that the best route of challenging prejudice and hate is actually through our education system rather than our criminal justice system. So two examples where they took the goodwill of the Parliament, the good intentions of the Parliament, but they then do not implement on those good intentions and that goodwill. They cannot make that mistake with legislation going forward because that undermines the cause of social justice, undermines the cause of progressive politics. Libby, on you go.
Thank you. You were talking in your speech about practical ways of making devolution work, and your colleague Ian Murray was suggesting having cross-departmental Scottish ministers in the UK government as something that might be a way of making sure that Scotland gets its voice heard in Cabinet. Is that something that you would support? And also, in terms of Gordon Brown's Constitutional Commission, what is the first thing, the most immediate thing that you would like to see introduced from that?
Well, firstly, we're already working with Keir Starmer, Sue Gray and the team around how we can strengthen intergovernmental relations immediately if we have the honour of being elected as the next UK Labour government. I think that's really important because we have to make sure that cooperation is about delivering for Scotland, not about governments fighting with each other and ultimately failing Scotland. And in terms of the first things that need to happen after a UK general election, I think when we talk about resetting devolution, I think one of the challenges we have when we think about devolution is people often think about a powers mix as something that's on a sheet of paper and somehow there is the perfect model that sorts every single problem in Scotland. We all know, though, that if you have bad faith actors, you can have the best written down constitution in the world, it will still ultimately fail. And the tragedy we have right now is we don't just have one bad faith actor, we've got two bad faith actors. We've got UK-wide bad faith actors who've never believed in devolution, and we've got Scottish Government bad faith actors who actually want to end devolution because the conflict suits them. So the number one thing that we will do is reset devolution, work constructively, make sure there is good intergovernmental relations, and make sure we're pushing power out from every level of our democracy. The House of Lords needs reform, the House of Commons needs reform, the Scottish Parliament needs reform, and local government needs reform. And we want a decade of renewal, and decade of democratic reform that will be led both, of course, by our UK colleagues, but we will lead here in Scotland if we have the privilege of being in government after 2026. David?
Thanks, Anas. In Wales, they've agreed to increase the number of members of the Senate from 60 to 96, I think it is, to kind of future-proof the devolution in Wales. Given the expansion of powers in Holyrood has changed sort of considerably since 99, would you welcome a look at sort of increasing the number of MSPs or even looking at a second chamber? And secondly, following on from Andrew, do you share the concerns some in your party about Natalie Elphicke being welcome into Labour, and does it show your party will take anyone?
So, firstly, on the number of MSPs, I think trust is so fundamentally broken in our politics that if we went to the public and said the answer is more politicians when they're so frustrated with politics, I think we'd actually turn them away. And I think before we look at reform of the numbers, increasing the number of parliamentarians, increasing the cost of doing government or the cost of doing parliament, I think we have to demonstrate to people that we know how to do effective government, we understand their frustrations, and we will make use of what we have to maximise benefit and delivery for Scotland. So we're not in the place of looking at increasing the number of MSPs. What we are looking at, though, in terms of where we could increase the number of elected members is regional mayors. And I think there is something about how you pull local authorities together around regions to maximise the economic opportunities and to leverage in that greater support. Look at what they've done in Greater Manchester, look at what's happening in Liverpool in the greater region, look at what's happening in Yorkshire, look at what's about to happen in the West Midlands now with Richard Parker as the new mayor. I'm claiming credit for that victory, having spent 2 days in Birmingham. I'm claiming full credit of Richard Parker winning there. But I think that's what we need to look at, is how we change and push power out rather than just talking about more parliamentarians, because I think that would turn off the electorate who already feel so distant from our politics. On Natalie Elphicke, look, I don't know Natalie Elphicke. I've never met Natalie Elphicke. Lots of her comments I find completely unacceptable. But what I do agree with her on, is that Rishi Sunak's time is up, that we have a chaotic and divided Conservative Party that must be booted out of office, and that we need a Labour government. But the person I'll be supporting is Mike Tapp, who's the Labour candidate in Dover and Deal, who will be a fantastic Labour MP and one of very many that helps us deliver a UK Labour government and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. On you go.
Anas, you mentioned a couple of times that Scottish Labour is going to become the party of devolution, but recent polling found that a quarter of Scots already think it's failed. It's been described as being tolerated and not loved. It hasn't delivered in the way that people expected, and there's still some confusion in the general public about which powers belong to which government and who's making the decisions. Are you worried that you have an uphill battle to overcome that bad reputation of devolution?
So actually I don't, and the reason why is I often think about, if you're 28 or under, you haven't lived a single day of your adult life in a stable UK or a competent Scottish government. And therefore you look, whether you look at the UK government and think to yourself, I need an escape route, I need a parachute, I need to get out of here, it's not working for me. Or you look at what's happening in Scotland over the last 17 years and think this Parliament has been used as a campaign rather than a delivery tool, and therefore it hasn't worked. And I think the job that we have to do, and I look at the generation that came before us, can you imagine trying to campaign for and deliver a Scottish Parliament now? It would be so difficult given the levels of mistrust that exist in our politics. But a generation of Labour politicians were willing to stick their head up above the parapet, were willing to make the case, win the argument, and deliver this Parliament. And I relish the opportunity, actually, of making the case, winning the argument for why devolution is the right thing, why having a strong Scottish Parliament is right for Scotland and right for the UK, and then make the case about what it can do to change people's lives. That's the argument we need to have, because I can see it already going into the election in 2026, where the Conservatives will want to say this institution has failed and we should just go as protesters to the institution. And you have the SNP on the other side who say this institution has failed because if only we had independence and want to push in a different direction. Labour will be the only party going into that election in 2026 that says we are the party of devolution. We believe in the Scottish Parliament. We believe in the ideas and the talents of the Scottish people to deliver for Scotland, and vote us in to show you how we can make this work in your interest and change your life and improve our public services in the process. Actually, I relish that dividing line come that election, because we will be the change makers and they will be the ones fighting for the status quo, or indeed trying to take us backwards in terms of Scotland's story. Justin, you want to come in?
Thanks, Anas. There's been a bit of a tension lately over the fact that a number of Labour candidates in Scotland are based nowhere near the constituencies they're running in. Is there a kind of dearth of local talent for Labour at the moment to run in these areas? And are you confident that, for example, someone based in Canterbury can effectively represent Angus, or that somebody based in Edinburgh can effectively represent Orkney and Shetland?
Well, first of all, Edinburgh is in Scotland, so I'm happy to give that clarification around people standing in Scottish constituencies and Scottish seats. But look, there's a wider point here, which is there are people who have connections and ties to Scotland who want to come and serve the Scottish people. And I am not going to turn my back on someone that has a love for Scotland, a story about Scotland, or a connection in Scotland that wants to deliver for the people of Scotland. And look, I actually use Mel Ward as a really good example, who's just been elected in the seat in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath. A Scot that is actually impacting change for one of the hardest hit parts of the world right now. As Chief Executive of Medical Aid for Palestinians, she is spending every minute of every day trying to get life-saving supplies into the Gaza Strip to save people's lives, to get them the necessary treatments they need because of a completely broken health system, and trying to argue the case of trying to end violence and bring about lasting peace. Nobody can tell me she is not a phenomenal candidate standing in a Scottish seat who would be a great champion for the Scottish Labour Party and deliver change for the Scottish people, whilst also celebrating Labour's internationalism to defeat poverty and injustice right around the world. So I'm proud of our candidates. We're brimming with talent, we're brimming with confidence, and I can't wait to elect a whole host of new Scottish Labour MPs and a whole host of new Scottish Labour MSPs in government delivering for the Scottish people. Thank you very much, everybody. I wonder if you guys want a photo with Jackie on the platform as well. Come on, Jackie, come and get a photo. Don't be shy, Jackie. Come on, come on, come on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.